Does coffee improve memory? Most people start their morning with coffee. For some, it's just a habit. For others, it's a ritual, the one thing that makes the day feel possible. And for many, it's the switch that turns the brain on. But here's the real question. Does coffee actually improve memory? Or does it just feel like it does because you're more awake? Let's be honest, coffee is controversial for a reason. One day you hear, coffee is good for the brain. The next day you hear, coffee destroys your nervous system. Both statements can be true, depending on how much you drink, when you drink it, your sleep quality, your stress levels, and even your genetics. Now, as a doctor, I want to start with one important truth. Coffee is not just caffeine. Coffee is a complex biological cocktail. A single cup contains hundreds of active compounds, polyphenols, antioxidants, acids, and stimulants that can influence the brain and body in multiple ways. But the fastest and most noticeable effect comes from one mechanism. Caffeine blocks adenosine. Adenosine is the brain's fatigue signal. It slowly builds up during the day, telling your nervous system, "You're tired. Slow down. Rest." Caffeine blocks those receptors, so the brain doesn't feel the fatigue signal. That's why after coffee, you often feel sharper focus, faster thinking, better reaction speed, improved attention. And many people mistake that effect for better memory. But here's the nuance. Coffee doesn't magically make your brain smarter. It often makes your brain temporarily more alert, like turning on brighter lights in a room. The furniture doesn't change, but you see everything more clearly. So yes, coffee can help your performance, but memory is deeper than alertness. Memory includes encoding information, storing it, retrieving it later, and connecting it to other knowledge. And coffee can influence those processes, but not always in the way people expect. Because there's another layer. Coffee can improve brain blood flow. In many people, coffee improves microcirculation, more oxygen delivery, better nutrient supply, faster neural signaling. That's why some people say, "I remember things better after coffee." But we still need to ask, is it true memory improvement or just better concentration that makes learning easier in the moment? That's what we're going to break down, step by step. Coffee and long-term brain health. When researchers started studying coffee long-term, they noticed something interesting. People who drink coffee regularly often show lower rates of certain neurodegenerative diseases, especially in population studies. This includes conditions like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. To be clear, coffee is not a treatment, but it may act as a protective factor in some people. Why? 1. Antioxidants and polyphenols. Coffee is one of the biggest sources of antioxidants in many diets, even bigger than fruits, simply because people drink coffee every day. Antioxidants help reduce oxidative stress, and oxidative stress matters because brain cells are extremely sensitive. Over years, oxidative stress can damage neurons and accelerate aging, so coffee's antioxidant profile may help protect the brain environment. 2. Reduced inflammation in the nervous system. Some coffee compounds may reduce inflammation markers. Chronic inflammation is linked to faster cognitive decline, worse mood, and impaired learning. So the right amount of coffee may support brain stability. But here's the warning. Too much coffee can do the opposite. Excess caffeine can trigger anxiety, irritability, poor sleep, rapid heart rate, elevated cortisol. And once sleep is damaged, memory gets worse. Because memory is not built during your morning coffee. Memory is built during deep sleep. That means coffee can improve your daytime performance, but if it steals your sleep, it can silently destroy your memory over time. So the real question becomes, what matters more, the coffee boost or the sleep it may cost you? And here's the part most people don't know. Coffee affects people differently because of genetics. Some people break down caffeine fast. Others break it down slowly. 2 people can drink the same cup, and one will sleep fine, while the other will lie awake at 2:40 a.m. with a racing mind. That difference changes everything. Coffee, attention, and the illusion of better memory. Many people say something very confidently. I remember things better when I drink coffee. But when scientists started studying this carefully, they discovered something interesting. Coffee does not necessarily improve memory itself. Instead, it improves attention. And attention is the first step of memory.
Think about it like this. Your brain is constantly receiving information from the world. Voices, images, sounds, ideas, conversations, reading, screens. But your brain cannot store everything. It only remembers what it pays attention to. Attention acts like a spotlight. Whatever falls inside that spotlight becomes easier to remember later. And this is exactly where coffee enters the story. Caffeine increases the activity of certain neurotransmitters in the brain. Two of the most important are dopamine, norepinephrine. These chemicals increase alertness. They make neurons communicate faster. They increase the brain's readiness to process information. So after drinking coffee, something subtle happens. Your brain becomes more selective. You focus more strongly on the task in front of you. You notice details faster. You process information more actively. And because of that, information entering your brain during that period has a higher chance of being stored. So the memory improvement is not magical. It is indirect. Coffee improves the conditions that allow memory to form. Researchers sometimes describe this as improving encoding. Encoding means the process of transforming an experience into a memory. If encoding is weak, the memory never forms properly. If encoding is strong, the brain stores information more effectively. And caffeine can help strengthen this early stage. But here comes an important nuance. Coffee helps most when the brain is tired. If you are already fully alert, caffeine may not improve performance very much. In fact, too much stimulation can reduce focus. Your thoughts become scattered. Your mind jumps from idea to idea. Your heart rate increases. And instead of calm concentration, you feel restless. This is why many students make a common mistake. They drink large amounts of coffee while studying. They feel energetic, but later they realize something strange. They remember less than they expected. Because attention was not stable, it was overstimulated. The brain needs balanced stimulation, not too sleepy, not too wired. And this balance is different for every person. Some people feel focused after half a cup of coffee. Others need 1 full cup, and some people actually perform better with very little caffeine at all. This is why the relationship between coffee and memory is complex.
Coffee does not replace learning. Coffee does not replace sleep. Coffee does not replace discipline. But used correctly, it can support the brain during demanding mental work. However, there is another fascinating layer of the story. Because coffee does not only influence attention, it also interacts with something even more powerful: motivation. Coffee, dopamine, and motivation to learn. Memory is not only about the brain's ability to store information, it is also about motivation. When the brain is interested in something, memory becomes stronger. When the brain is bored, memory becomes weak. You may have experienced this many times. You can easily remember a conversation you enjoyed, but you struggle to remember a lecture you didn't care about. Why? Because emotion and motivation activate the brain's reward system, and this system is heavily influenced by a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine is often called the motivation molecule, but that description is slightly misleading. Dopamine is not about pleasure. It is about drive. It is about the feeling that something is worth doing. And caffeine can slightly increase dopamine signaling.
Not dramatically, like some drugs do, but enough to change how the brain approaches tasks. After drinking coffee, many people experience a subtle shift. Tasks feel easier to start. The brain becomes more willing to engage. You feel more prepared to solve problems. This is why coffee is so common in workplaces and universities. It is not only about staying awake, it is about activating the brain's task engagement system. When dopamine increases even slightly, the brain begins to treat tasks differently. Learning becomes more active. Thinking becomes more structured. Curiosity increases. And curiosity is one of the strongest drivers of memory. The brain remembers what it finds meaningful,
So coffee can indirectly support learning by increasing the brain's readiness to engage with information. But again, balance is everything. If caffeine levels rise too high, dopamine signaling can become unstable. Instead of calm motivation, the brain may enter a state with agitation. This leads to nervous energy, racing thoughts, impatience, reduced cognitive control. And at that point, memory formation becomes worse, because the brain needs a stable internal environment to build long-term memories. This is why experienced researchers often recommend moderate caffeine use during learning. Not zero, not excessive, just enough to support alertness and motivation. But the story does not end there, because coffee influences memory in another surprising way, and this effect happens after learning, not during it. Scientists call this process memory consolidation, and it turns out that caffeine consumed at the right moment may influence how memories are stored in the brain hours later. This discovery changed the way researchers think about coffee and learning, because it suggests that timing might matter more than quantity. And that leads us to a fascinating question. Could coffee help the brain lock in memories after learning? We'll explore that in the next section. Coffee and memory consolidation. When we talk about memory, most people think about the moment of learning. Reading a book, listening to a lecture, watching a video, studying for an exam. But neuroscience shows that memory does not end when learning stops. In fact, one of the most important stages happens afterward. This stage is called memory consolidation.
Memory consolidation is the process through which the brain stabilizes and strengthens information that was recently learned. At first, memories are fragile. They exist in short-term neural patterns that can easily disappear. But over time, the brain reorganizes this information and stores it more permanently. This process involves several regions of the brain, especially the hippocampus, which acts as a temporary memory hub. Later, memories are gradually transferred into different areas of the cerebral cortex, where long-term knowledge is stored. For years, scientists believed that caffeine only helped during the learning process, but a fascinating study revealed something unexpected. Researchers gave participants caffeine after they had finished learning new information, not before, not during, after. The results surprised many neuroscientists. Participants who consumed caffeine after studying showed better memory recall the next day compared to those who did not. The difference was not enormous, but it was measurable. So, what might be happening? One explanation is that caffeine influences certain chemical signals involved in neurostrengthening.
When neurons communicate repeatedly, their connections become stronger. This process is called long-term potentiation, often abbreviated as LTP. LTP is one of the fundamental biological mechanisms behind memory formation. Some research suggests that caffeine may support this strengthening process by altering neurotransmitter activity and neural signaling patterns. However, the relationship is delicate. A small amount of caffeine may support consolidation. Too much caffeine may disturb it. And the biggest factor influencing memory consolidation is not coffee, it is sleep. During deep sleep, the brain replays neural patterns created during the day. You can think of it like the brain pressing the save button. Important information is reinforced, unimportant information is discarded. And this is where coffee becomes both helpful and dangerous, because caffeine has a long half-life in the body. In many people, caffeine can remain active for 6 to 8 hours. For slow metabolizers, it can remain even longer. So if someone drinks coffee late in the day, something subtle can happen. They may still fall asleep, but the structure of their sleep changes. Deep sleep becomes lighter.
Sleep cycles become fragmented, and memory consolidation becomes less efficient. This means the very thing that helped learning earlier in the day could quietly weaken memory later at night. So coffee has two faces. One face supports alertness and learning. The other can interfere with the brain's nighttime memory processing. And this is why timing may be one of the most important factors when it comes to coffee and brain performance. The timing of coffee and brain performance. Most people drink coffee automatically. They wake up, they reach for coffee. They repeat this pattern every day. But the brain does not work on habit alone. It works on biological rhythms. Your body follows a daily cycle known as the circadian rhythm. This rhythm regulates sleep, hormones, body temperature, alertness, and cognitive performance. One of the key hormones involved in this rhythm is cortisol. Cortisol often gets a bad reputation because it is associated with stress. But cortisol is not inherently harmful. In fact, cortisol plays an essential role in waking the brain up. In the morning, cortisol levels naturally rise. This helps the brain become alert. Energy levels increase. Reaction speed improves.
The body prepares for the day. Now, here is something interesting. If you drink coffee immediately after waking up, caffeine overlaps with this natural cortisol peak, and that can reduce the efficiency of caffeine. In other words, the brain is already activating itself. Adding caffeine at that moment may provide less benefit than people expect. Some sleep researchers suggest that waiting 60 to 90 minutes after waking may produce a stronger cognitive effect from caffeine. By that time, natural cortisol levels begin to decline slightly, and caffeine can then provide a more noticeable boost. Another important factor is the afternoon window. Many people experience a natural dip in alertness between early afternoon and late afternoon. This is part of the circadian rhythm and is completely normal. A moderate amount of caffeine during this period can temporarily restore mental clarity, but timing again becomes important. If caffeine is consumed too late in the day, it may interfere with sleep. Even if someone falls asleep quickly, caffeine may reduce deep sleep stages, and deep sleep is where the brain performs some of its most important work. This includes memory consolidation,